we are not doing the right thing, in our opinion. Well, and look, it's so important that those little league teams in the 60s and the 70s, where the parents really had to shell out just a minimal registration fee, if that sometimes. It's so essential that those types of experiences can still occur now, because maybe 80 to 90% of families can't afford travel ball.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Clearing the Bases, the podcast where we step up to the plate and dive deep into the world of youth baseball. I'm your host, Jimmy Filangieri. On this show, we discuss all things related to the preparation and development of youth baseball players, coaches, and yes, even parents. So sit back, settle in, and get ready to hear from some of the greatest baseball minds out there.
We encountered many wonderful coaches along the way, but the point of the book is you can have wonderful coaches. Not all of them are wonderful, by the way, but we encountered many wonderful ones. You can have that, but when you have a system where there are immense temptations to make decisions that are not in the best interest of the youth, then we have a problem on our hands.
We're going to shift gears and we're going to go into a little bit different direction once again. And we're going to have two authors, Gene Linscott and Ken Ruoff. And they wrote a book called What is the Goal? The Truth About the Youth Sports Industry. So you can imagine, once I heard that, I was very interested. The book just got released today. So this is going to be a good conversation about youth sports and where they're going, where they've been, good points, bad points. Thanks for coming on, guys. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having us.
It's great to be here.
This is fantastic because this show we talk about youth baseball. So every once in a while I like to switch it up and get people like yourselves that have this unique perspective of being parents of athletes and being authors, so have done quite a bit of research, I imagine, on youth sports, and this is great. So let's move into a direction first. What prompted you to write the book?
Well, we have always been sports fans, whether it be playing on the fields of high school for both of us, college for Ken, or watching our favorite sports teams, cheering on the college teams, the pro teams. We've always had sports be something that brought us together. And later on, when we got married and had 3 kids, we continued to have sports as a part of our lives, including Ken started coaching all 3 of them at the rec level. And all of our kids were very passionate about sports. They played multiple different sports from maybe age 5 on up through high school and college. And so we were busy as can be, participating, driving, paying the bills. And by the time things slowed down and our kids were coming out the tail end of this, we started to say, what did we just go through? What just happened? And, you know, we had spent hours and hours along the way of team to team, club to club, sport to sport, trying to figure out what it was. We couldn't exactly put our finger on what had changed so drastically from the time that we played sports. We knew there was something very different, and we had a pretty good, strong hunch that there were some things that had changed for the worse. And so we began to do some research to find more information to help us answer the questions that we had along the way, but never had the time, or you're not always in the good position to ask some of those questions when you are a parent of a player. So we decided to write this book together And here's what happened maybe 4 or 5 years later.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's fantastic. And what I did fail to mention was that first of all, they are a husband and wife team, and Jean is a clinical child psychologist, and Ken is a professor of history at Portland State University. Ken, you've written other books too, right?
Yes.
Okay, so this is your
Oh, this is my fifth book.
wow, wow. God
But the
bless you.
first one he wrote with his wife.
That's right.
Well,
And we're still together. We're still together.
I was going to say, well, that makes it more important. So,
Yeah.
let's get into it. So let's just give people a little bit of a time frame. When did your kids start playing sports? Like how long ago?
So the oldest was born in 1997. So, 2002-ish.
Yeah, when she was about 5.
Okay. Okay. So, about the time that travel balls, I mean, I'm not sure. I didn't even get into what sports did they play? Did they?
Oh, a long list. Soccer was each of their main sports, but they played soccer, basketball, baseball, softball, lacrosse, hockey, tennis.
Wow.
You name them, they really enjoyed them.
That's fantastic. But the point was that you had just kind of gotten into sports with your kids at the time when travel sports was starting to take off a bit.
That's right. Hmm.
And so give me a little idea of, like how did it start out? What direction did things move in?
Well, I think it's true for most families that pay to play travel club sports starts out, somewhat innocently. The early on, they don't do that much travel, and it doesn't cost that much. But before long, you're writing some pretty serious checks, and the kids are doing some, serious travel, and they're being kept busy for about 40 weekends out of the year. It becomes a lifestyle choice. That's not just the kids, that's the whole family, in fact. And so this is quite a different beast than what we grew up with. And interestingly enough, one of the first questions that we started asking coaches who we knew would answer honestly to us was, does this like going away to travel tournaments, does it even help develop them as athletes? And these coaches like thought in some cases, how could we ask such a foolish question? They said it plays no role whatsoever, especially at the younger ages. It plays no role.
Good for them.
Yeah, in developing athletes. And so what is it exactly about? It's about things other than developing athletes. We can talk more about that.
Some of it early on was about fun, excitement, being with new friends, being with your teammates, just an exciting entry into, wow, kids can do this in sports these days. But we have 3 kids. So with the first one, it seemed like it was kind of doable. And then it got to be time-wise and expense-wise nearly undoable. Thank goodness for good carpools. 2 working parents with the 2 of us very flexible schedules. But even so, the time demands and the expense were pretty overwhelming.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I mean, I've been involved in travel baseball for a very long time. As a matter of fact, I got out of it for probably a lot of the reasons that you guys had to deal with. The same things bothered me, even though I was coaching. So I do understand that. It's difficult. And what I'll say is, and you had just mentioned about it, is that, yeah, I get the fun aspect of it. I get the point that, hey, we're going to go away. We're going to spend some time in the hotel. We're going to run around. We're going to get crazy. We're going to play a little baseball. I understand that. But is it worth the money?
That's exactly right. And and given all that money that parents are investing in this, there are some unintended consequences that come with that. One of them being research shows that the more money that parents are investing in their child's sports participation, travel, etc., the more pressure the child athlete feels to continue to play and to perform.
Sure.
And so that's one problem. The second problem, a little more obvious, is how many families can afford to do this? And even if you can sort of afford to do it, what are you sacrificing? Are you saving for their college? Are you saving for your retirement? What is getting sacrificed for the family finances? But most importantly, in this system, there are some pretty significant harms that can come to the youth athlete when they are caught up. Athletes, parents, coaches, clubs are caught up in this enormously profitable and unregulated system, and money can unintentionally corrupt even with the best of intentions. And so the youth athletes are the ones who often suffer the consequences of this, including overuse injuries and burnout from a game that was supposed to be fun and help build strong bodies and strong minds.
And if I could just stress something.
Sure.
Gene and I are very much in favor of youth sports. Anyone who reads the book will understand that. And we also stress in the book that we encountered many wonderful coaches along the way. But the point of the book is you can have wonderful coaches. Not all of them are wonderful, by the way, but we encountered many, many wonderful ones. You can have that, but when you have a system where there are immense temptations to make decisions that are not in the best interest of the youth, then we have a problem on our hands, because even the best of people can get swallowed up in a system that is problematic.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I just posted it on social media recently that the current state of travel sports it's a business model. It is not a player development model. And that's my opinion. That's where a lot of the problem comes in, because, everybody will preach whatever they believe is their quote unquote development system for a player. But if you go to USA Baseball, and that's the governing body of amateur baseball in the country, their long-term development plan says that you should be practicing 65% and playing games 35%, okay? And that does not happen. And to me, that's a problem.
There are very similar formulas for soccer, and I suspect they exist for most sports. And there are no practices as a basic rule that happen during these travel tournaments, in no small part because there's unlikely to be any fields available. And additionally, what sort of practice can you have if you have two games on a day?
Yeah. I'm just actually in the process of trying to put together a program that we'll say it kind of turns travel baseball on its head. So I want to practice 3 times a week with the boys and maybe do like a doubleheader on a Saturday or a Sunday, and that's it. Okay. And as a high school coach, I'm seeing all of these problems that are happening because kids are playing way too many games. They don't know how to play the game. They're basically being told, here's your uniform, here's your cleats, here's a ball, bat, glove. Go ahead, go run out there. And if you do something wrong, again, this is not all coaches, but a lot of coaches will get upset with you. But wait a minute, you didn't teach him anything.
Right. They're expected to act like little mini pros and play a schedule that's sometimes more punishing than a pro schedule.
And for the pay-to-play clubs to be dressed like little pros needlessly and expensively.
Yes. like I said, I mean, I could not agree with you more. It's a problem. I mean, I sit on the ABCA youth committee, and we meet once a year to kind of brainstorm to come up with how we can come up with solutions for across the board, whether it be little league, travel baseball, everything, for youth baseball. And let me tell you something, we have some guys from all over the country, really smart baseball people, and it's not easy for us to figure out how to turn this ship around.
Yeah.
Hmm. I
So,
believe it.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a crazy world out there. So, you had mentioned something a little bit, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, but when you said about the paying all of the money and the pressure that's on the player, isn't a big question, we'll say, is what is my return on investment for parents? Tell me a little about that.
Yes.
Yeah, we were more than a little startled, even after having been part of this for 25 years, when we took a very close look at the verbiage at the websites of various pay to play clubs, because there's this whole new nomenclature of marketing youth sports. And many of the clubs explicitly promise a return on investment. And normally what that means, if you're looking at the clubs, is that supposedly they're going to help your kid get a spot on a college team. Okay. Very rarely is there discussion of citizenship, of teaching teamwork, about just teaching the sort of life skills that we want our kids to have, whether they go on to play in college or any higher level or not. And this this is quite a difference from the previous generation. My parents, I'm the youngest of five, so frankly, they were a little too old for me to ask directly what, if they thought in their minds at the time, if they were looking for a return on investment by getting me to my little league games and getting me home from my high school practices before, I got my license. But I suspect what they would have said is that we were trying to socialize you. They might have been trying to keep me busy, an age-old technique for keeping teenagers out of trouble. I don't think that they sat down and looked at each other and said, we're going to sink a chunk of money into this so that we can get preferential admission for college.
It is.
Or that somehow, if you get to the right club at age 10, that's your path to the pros, because look at that website, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's really really bizarre. But you had mentioned about when we were young, and especially for me when I played little league in the early '70s. Okay, I could just imagine, like I see nowadays, and you would mention about all of the equipment and the uniforms and the this and that. I could imagine if I went to my father and I said to him, "Hey, Dad, I need, this bat or that," he would have probably hit me with it. That would have been the end of it. There was
Yes.
there was no thought of anything when we were kids. And the guys who played in high school that shined and scouts happened to notice, and you went on to other things. But now, like you had said, at 10, I've seen travel teams at 6 years old. What are we doing?
We are not doing the right thing, in our opinion. Well, and look, it's so important that those little league teams in the 60s and the 70s, where the parents really had to shell out just a minimal registration fee, if that sometimes. It's so essential that those types of experiences can still occur now, because maybe 80 to 90% of families can't afford travel ball. And yet, because there's appearance that, the ball fields are filled with players, that somehow youth sports is well and good, when so many of the rec centers and community centers and fields that were used to be free to use are no longer accessible to the vast majority of our youth. And that's a big, big problem.
Sure it is. I agree 100%. I mean, when I was involved with, well, here we don't have Little League, we have Cal Ripken. And when I was involved in it, that's kind of around the time where travel ball started to take off a little bit. But one of the things that I noticed, and this to this day I still don't understand this, the people that run these leagues, a lot of them are not baseball people. We'll say it that way.
Yep.
So they don't know what's best for the kids. They don't know how to develop their coaches. They don't know how to develop players. I really don't know what they do, because even when I was involved, I would bring up many, many times, hey guys, we have a handbook from Cal Ripken that tells us exactly what to do. Why are we not doing it? You know?
Right.
And so I think what happens is that people get their own personal feelings, and this is how I think travel ball took off the way it did, that, these guys, they don't do it the way I want to do it, so I'm going to just take some kids and go play travel ball.
Maybe, but I'm going to introduce a topic for Ken to talk more about. I think those guys who didn't know a whole lot about baseball knew a whole lot about making money off of travel tournaments.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
We were surprised that the amount of money that's made off tournaments, we knew there was money being made. We didn't know that a tournament could net $100,000 or $1 million, a single
one weekend
tournament. Thus you have the incentive to go do something that has no value whatsoever in terms of developing athletes, but is making lots of people money. And I can just say that, we dutifully went to every beginning of the year club-wide meeting and heard a flowery speech about how the club was all about development and not winning. And then the fact of the matter is before long, we were looking for the least worst club in this area, because there were certain factors that required them to concentrate, or at least they decided that they required them to concentrate on winning. If you can win as many state cups, in this case in soccer, as possible, you put the pictures of the winning teams up at your website, and this is a way to market the club. And so when the state cup competition came around, and it can last like a month, all of the promises about development went out the board, and there were kids who didn't play a single minute during state cup games. And so, again, I just want to reiterate, there's a lot of good people, but you have profit temptation. And when there's the temptation for profit, often the kids are getting left behind. They're not doing what's best for the kids, and they're not really doing what's best for the families. I really want to stress to all those families out there, you may be having fun on what we call tournications, the travel tournaments. And please consider them to be tournications, because they're not doing anything to help your child develop as an athlete, at least certainly not anything at the younger ages, maybe as they get into the late teen years. For the more, the ones who are proving to be particularly good at a sport, at those later ages, they may start to have some value. But, you 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, no value. So you're basically, you're sending the kids on a vacation.
And one could argue that not only is there no value, but they contribute to doing harm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wish more people would understand that a game, whether it be a tournament game, it be a league game, whatever the case is, the game is the test, okay, and the practice is the homework and the classroom work, right? Mm-hmm. So by not doing the classroom work, not doing the homework, and then putting kids on the field to perform, think about that. If you had a math test and you had no classroom instruction, you had no homework, and then you went and took the test, what's going to happen? You're going to fail. And we're setting those kids up for failure.
Yeah.
along with sky high expectations at the same time. Whereas it used to be that, well, okay, yeah, you win some, you lose some. That attitude is very, very different in many parents who participate in these sports industries.
Yeah.
You see, I mean, I actually followed one of these for about 6 or 7 years because there's such an emphasis on winning. A coach at like U10 will decide that Johnny is a left back. Okay. In baseball, maybe it would be like third baseman or something. Johnny's a left back. And then for 6, 7 years going forward, and often 70 games a year, all Johnny ever gets to play is left back. And it's insanity. Surely it's not so important to win each and every one of those games that Johnny couldn't get a whirl at forward, which might actually make him better as a defender, or just put him in goal.
Yeah.
Just for the fun of seeing what goal is. And then another thing I wanted to mention that was one of the more curious things that we came across is that I'm sure this is the same for almost all sports, but we played for clubs that were sponsored by Nike or Adidas, depending on which club. And normally, and actually, this is another change from our generation. If the local ice cream shop sponsored the Little League team a generation ago, it just meant that the kids' uniforms were actually bought by the ice cream shop. But what it actually means today, far from saving the parents' money, it means that you're required to buy about a $350 uniform kit from either Nike or Adidas every other year.
Yeah.
And so it's basically forced consumption to dress the kiddies as professionals. And of course, that also has nothing to do with development. It has to do with prestige and things like that.
Right.
So we do not see, often when you look at suggestions for reform, people may talk about the role of private industry. We do not see that as a great solution.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like you had just mentioned about the Adidas again, and Nike, it's a marketing thing. Okay. So it has to do with marketing. And then let's face it, we're not dumb. You're buying these uniforms and there's X amount of kids in, and Adidas is kicking back to the owner so much for so many uniforms. So again, it goes back to the business model. It's about making money, and everybody wants to get all excited. Oh, wow. We're an Adidas organization and this and that. Well, like you said, it really doesn't mean anything other than you're helping to pad Adidas pockets and the tournament or the organizations.
And you're a walking billboard from a very young age.
Yeah. Yeah. We can't put that genie back in the bottle. There's no way.
Yeah. Yeah, there's two genies that we would really like to put back in the bottle. In no small part because we strongly believe that youth sports should not be left to the market. We think that this is one of these things that should not be market-based and should be available to all the youth in the United States. So the first thing we want to put back in the bottle is the travel. And if we put that back in the bottle, that would take away a very large percentage of the expense. Making it accessible to a lot more families. The other thing we'd like to put back in the bottle is this insane year-round schedule. And not only would that prevent the absolutely appalling overuse injury epidemic, but that would reduce the cost down to a point that probably most families would actually be able to participate. Whereas today, we can't provide an absolutely exact number, but we looked at medium income and we're thinking that most 15% of American families can participate in this pay-to-play industry. So we'd love to put those two back in the bottle. And what's interesting is that I unfortunately, I kind of agree with you. I don't know if it's going to happen anytime soon, but neither contribute to development.
No.
And they cause
More harm.
more harm than they do good. Mm.
Yeah. I mean, I know you'd be hard pressed to find travel coaches. And again, I don't want to paint with a broad brush because I know there are good coaches out there, but I would bet that there are very few travel ball coaches, baseball wise, that teach fundamentals of the game at any level. Any level. The simplest thing, like taking a lead off of first base. I guarantee, and there's a way to do it. And I guarantee they're not teaching them.
And why do you think that is? I mean, they have
What?
a lot of time with the kids.
How much time do we have? You want to stay out for 3 hours? The biggest issue is education, coaches' education. Biggest issue. Okay. And I've been a proponent. Matter of fact, I think one of my first shows that I did was coaching the coaches. That's what it was about. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Coaches need to understand, and I don't care what level you're coaching at. It doesn't matter. They have a responsibility to learn the rudiments of the game. I don't care how small they are. They have a responsibility. Now, just because you played at a high level does not mean that you know how to coach. There's no correlation there whatsoever. Okay, they're two different things. But that right there is the biggest problem. And it's very difficult because it's hard to force somebody to, in other words, a lot of these little leagues, they need the volunteers. And I tip my hat to volunteer coaches. I give them a lot of credit for doing that. But I still feel like you're volunteering to do a job. You have a certain responsibility to learn something that the boys could walk away with.
Right. And maybe with some more regulation of the industry, maybe there could be more requirements, even of volunteers, to meet the standards that some of these professional organizations, both in their sports and in the medical industries connected to these injuries that can happen in youth. If there were some regulations and a governing body that could hold clubs and coaches of all levels responsible, maybe we could get somewhere. But right now, it's largely the honor system, as far as we know.
Yeah.
You know where we saw in the most appalling manner imaginable the lack of coaching of the fundamentals and frankly the sort of exploitation of kids was in reference to the early developer. We saw over and over there'd be a girl who as early as U11 was like 5'9". And far from insisting that she learn the fundamentals, they were just using her to win games. You could just pop the ball over the top and she could outrun and outmuscle all the other girls who were still like, not 5 feet tall. Well, yeah, fine. It works at U11. It's not going to work down the road. And then often we even saw clubs then discard the early developers. They would get cut by U13 or U14, and so that was. I would really urge, in particular, the parents of early developers. There's a case where you have to be a little extra protective, and you have to make sure that you tell the coaches, I do not want you using my child's size to win. I want you to teach them the sort of fundamentals that they're going to need once they don't have the size advantage.
Well, I can add to that a little bit because, again, the thing that I see with early developers, and I believe this is a big problem, okay, to your point, yes, they use that kid to go out and win their games, do this. The biggest problem that I see is they do not hold that kid accountable, okay, and that's a problem. They don't hold them accountable, and 9 times, well, I shouldn't say 9 out of 10, but a lot of times what'll happen is those kids, because the talent funnels up and the talent gets harder and harder as you get older, well, what happens is they can't handle it because nobody ever kicked them in their butt, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they need to get used to being corrected from a young age and having expectations of them, and the size will not always um, get them through.
Yeah. And
Their people are just as big and good.
right, and I want to be clear too, and most people that listen to the show know because they've heard me say this. When I say hold a kid accountable, I don't mean if he makes an error, get on him. I don't mean if he strikes out. What I'm talking about, if he strikes out and he throws his bat in the dugout, okay, that's what I'm talking about. Or he misses a sign, or the mental stuff from the game, because he's going to need that when he gets older. And if you don't start correcting him when he's 10, 11, 12 years old, you're creating a monster.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You're helping them with their behavior and their attitude. Yep.
And really, let's face it, in any sport, I don't care what it is, that's the most important thing is your attitude and your effort. It has nothing to do with your talent. I mean, granted, yeah, the talent plays a part, but
Yeah.
and I just had on one of actually I just had on three of the 12U national USA national team coaches on. And we talked about it a lot because you got to imagine these are 12-year-old kids. They're young, they're babies. And,
Mm-hmm.
they're the best in the country at their age group. What distinguishes one of them from the next? Because they're all talented. And it's usually the attitude.
Mm. Yeah. They need good coaches, don't they?
You know, it's like I said, I just wish more coaches would understand to educate yourself. Just learn. I mean, I still learn. I still study. I still ask questions. How can I do this better? How can I help this player better? You have to do it.
Right. Right. They
So
need that.
I'm sorry.
Well, they need that from their coaches. Sure. Hmm.
So there was something that I wanted to get into with you, and I'm not sure if we touched on it with the Adidas thing or not, but there are system-wide conflicts of interest. Okay, is that what you were talking about when you were saying about the Adidas and the Nike, that there's a lot of conflict of interest?
Well, I think we are referencing, I think there could be that, that clubs are in some ways beholden to their professional sponsors, their industry sponsors, and will do a little bit more than they should to keep Adidas or Nike happy. But also the conflict of interest come more with, I think, the decision making that the parents, coaches, and clubs may make, given what's often a huge driver or pull or bait for people to stay and paying in this game is college scholarships and preferential admission to colleges for athletes. So with that, we find all kinds of conflict of interest of who gets to make some of these decisions. Is it the child who's deciding how long they're going to stay and play? Um, who gets to require how much is asked of the parents for travel? Because this may put their club at the prestigious top level club who's looking like the best in the state. It's more of those types of conflict of interest between the main priorities of the club and the coaches versus the main priority of the parents. And then the child athlete who's caught in the middle, and how do they advocate for themselves when each of these adult parties has competing interests and different agendas for the child? The child athlete's agenda may be very different than their parents and coaches. And who's going to advocate for them?
Yeah. Yeah, again, I mean, I know when my son was playing, I always told him from a very young age, don't you dare ever play this game because you think I want you to play. When you're done, you just come to me and say, hey, Dad, I don't want to play anymore. And that's fine with me, and that was it. And when he stopped playing, I was like, okay, bud, it's over, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's got to be like that.
Yeah. We encourage parents, even though it's so easy to get caught up in the system, um, can be like quicksand, once you're in, it's really hard to get out, to be very thoughtful and listen to their child at the beginning of each season before you sign the contract again, and ask them, no matter their level of talent, do you want to play again this year? And be prepared to listen to a no and take it seriously versus asking them just because you're supposed to ask them and then presenting your agenda of why they need to keep playing because of all this return on investment that may be ahead for the parents in maybe a little bit of college scholarship or maybe not.
Well, let's get into that a little bit because, we've mentioned college scholarship a few times so far. So, and I want to get your opinion on this. The landscape is going to change. I mean, I'm sure that you're up on what's going on with college sports, okay, especially baseball, right? So now they're talking about cutting the rosters from 40 down to 34, which is going to make less players, available, or I should say, there's going to be less spots for players. The transfer portal is, in my opinion, it's a mess. I had a player this year, senior, just graduated, and I reached out to a college coach that I know, and I said, hey, listen, take a look at this kid for me and let me know if he fits into your program, because I thought that he might be able to help him. He shot me back and he said, Jim, he said, we're not even looking at high school players anymore. He said, we're looking at transfers and we're looking at junior college players. So this is going to have a big trickle-down effect, okay, where players that are not playing at the D1 level are going to drop back to D2 and so on down the line, which I believe that travel baseball is going to be in a position where there's no college recruiters looking at them anymore. Are you guys familiar with this?
This is happening more and more in the soccer world. The college draft for the MLS is nowhere near as significant as it used to be. And many fewer players actually who are drafted actually make the transition to playing for the main MLS team.
Go ahead, Gene.
Well, yeah, and I could absolutely imagine how if they are no longer looking at the high school players, whether it's in a high school or on a travel team, that could really change this whole model, because often the allure that's promised is there will be coaches, scouts, etc., at these travel tournaments. But less and less, well, the more tournaments there are, we've found the less number of coaches that you're trying to get to see you actually attend.
And that is so true. I mean, I feel that if it's doing that, and again, if it keeps trickling down, that just maybe, and this would make me such a happy person, that maybe it will start filling the ranks of Little League Baseball again, where people will say, why am I spending all this money on these travel teams? For what?
Right. And let's make local recreational teams fabulous again and widely accessible and a whole lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, and if you could take a lot of these travel coaches who maybe have learned stuff, or there won't be, if they still want to coach, then maybe again, Little League, the benefit will be that Little League will now have a lot of coaches instead of needing a lot of coaches. And again, back in, like I had said, in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, the only travel teams that existed were the best of the best. That was it.
Yes.
And, if we could get back to that, where talent is noticed by a travel organization and they fill their ranks that way, as opposed to everybody and their brother having a travel team and just taking kids on your team because you need to fill a roster and bring in that revenue. That's terrible.
One of the things that you notice if you go to these travel tournaments is that, I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings, but for the most part, we're not necessarily talking about high-level youth soccer. I mean, right. People may convince themselves of that because they're paying a lot for it, but that's not the case to a neutral observer who actually knows something about youth soccer.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure soccer's the same as baseball, where, they'll go to a tournament or whatever, and, little Johnny will go out on the mound and he'll throw a no-hitter, and everybody will be all excited. Wow, he threw a no-hitter. This is great. Well, the first thing that I ask, who did he play against? You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Did he play against a really talented team and no hit him? Well, that's one thing. But if he played against a very weak team and he no hit him, well, that means nothing.
Yep. Well, we would like nothing more to see the change of this industry. And if it means that travel has to go and coaches shift where they work and dedicate their expertise, or they have the time to actually learn, or they're required to learn more, that would be fine by us. The more kids that come in and the less harm that's done to the kids who do have the fortune or misfortune of being a part of a travel team, great. We are in need of change.
Yeah. And that, again, it's a tough thing. I mean, do you have any suggestions or any thoughts on change?
Well, Ken has mentioned some of them previously. We've talked about, can we cut back to a single season of a club sport? Can we allow for high school sports to occur again? Can we eliminate travel? We've mentioned those, but we've also talked about ways in which, there's a lot of good science out there in the medical fields, where we have good knowledge about what can be done to help prevent a lot of these injuries that the kids are experiencing. There are several organizations of professionals that have grouped together and said, their mission is about preventing overuse injuries and concussions. And the data is there, but the data conflicts with the business model of a year-long industry where travel is a necessary component. So, well, a necessary component for the business model. Yeah. So we talk about maybe if we can have some more national level governing bodies. There are many countries of the world have something that's called a Ministry of Sports, where it's not optional that some of these things are enforced. And if clubs could have some of that Ministry of Sports stamp of approval, parents might know which one to steer towards if they're more interested in the health and well-being of their athletes than the return on investment. So yeah, we talk about that. We also talk about wondering if the insurance industry might on some level get involved about what they agree and do not agree to cover, either for insuring the club or paying for example, the fifth ACL repair surgery for a 16-year-old.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that.
Yeah, so we talk about that industry as well. There are others. We also wonder if we might get some professional athletes involved and on board with this idea that sports for all is far better for the health and well-being, not only of our kids, but maybe of our professional leagues as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, those, professional athletes, those are the guys that understand what it takes and could be a big help. But one of the things that we came up with at the ABCA, now, mind you, the ABCA is the biggest baseball coaches association in the world. We have like 18,000 members. And we felt that what we were going to try to do is start coming up with guidelines. And the problem is that you can't enforce them. Because USA Baseball, like I said, USA Baseball is the national governing body of baseball. They have all kinds of coaching education. It's great stuff, but they can't force you to do it.
Yeah.
So what we felt was that if we got like a seal of approval that this team's coaches are ABCA certified, okay, that, it's going to take time, but one, then maybe somebody say, hey, you know what? I want to be that. Hey, you know what? And then maybe it'll have a little trickle down effect and we can get more organizations that have coaches that are trained to a baseline. And
Right.
maybe that'll help.
We also talked about parents beginning to ask more difficult questions of the clubs before they sign the dotted line, like, do you keep track of your injury rates? Do you keep track of the reasons why people have left the club? Do you do exit interviews? Things of that nature, where the clubs may be asked to know that we are hoping that they will begin to hold themselves accountable too for the health and well-being of the athletes.
Yeah, that's tough because again, it's there was a youth sports host. He had a radio show here in New York for many, many, many years on Sunday mornings, and he used to call the world of travel sports the Wild Wild West, and that's what it is. Everybody's doing whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's it's like if you want to try out, let's say, for a certain organization, I don't know. I feel it's up to the parents to basically interview the organization and hold their feet to the fire.
Because who else will right now? No one else really can.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what are your coach's qualifications? Who am I put, I've seen youth, travel coaches during a practice sitting on a bucket looking at his phone.
Yeah. Yeah. We've seen that sort of thing. Well, one meta issue that I do want to stress is that we're convinced that the youth sports industry would collapse if colleges ended preferential admission.
Okay.
And what's going on here is kind of interesting because if you look at who gets preferential admission for most of the sports, talk about water polo, tennis, and even soccer. Well, typically to get preferential admission, you need to have apprenticed in the youth sports industry for 10 years, which can have cost, perhaps several $100,000. So we're talking about the socioeconomic elite. So it's actually an excuse for colleges to admit children of the socioeconomic elite, even as they sort of throw up their hands and say, well, we're admitting athletes.
Right.
They're admitting full tuition paying students whose families will likely donate. It basically plays right into the business model of elite colleges because donations are so important to the American higher education system.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of the stuff is going to change, like we talked about before, because of the landscape of college sports now. I think, and I'm hoping, and I just think it would be so much nicer if, travel ball went back to being the best of the best. And, I had mentioned to you that I used to coach travel baseball, but I stopped doing it. I don't know. I really don't know how, unless, like I said, this bit with the college baseball by pushing everything back down into the little leagues. If that happens, I'll be a happy man.
Well, we'd be happy with you. We have experienced some coaches who were courageous enough to say, to pull in a parent meeting with a very talented group of young players and say, I am not in the business of spending your money on travel, so we're going to take a vote. I could offer some possible travel tournaments to these kids. Or we could stay and train and play locally, and we will develop them here. And what are your interests? Well, the parents voted not to go.
Good
Is
for
that a
them.
surprise?
Yeah, good for them.
Yeah.
That's very similar to what I'm trying to pull off this fall. I don't think that we need to spend money on hotels and gas and meals and all of that stuff. We can go to the local field. We can work on, our fundamentals, let the boys get better, and then we'll play a game on the weekend so we could see if they are actually learning anything. And then, like I do with my high school team, I'll sit there, I'll take notes and say, okay, we didn't do this right. We didn't do that right. Go back to practice, work on it again. That's how the kids get better. We don't need to go 3 hours away to go play in a tournament. That's ridiculous.
Well, and it was a model that worked one generation ago, and people still enjoyed high school, college, and pro sports.
Yeah.
Yeah, and another thing that sadly happened here in Oregon, the larger high schools are known as 6A, and in the Portland area, you won't make a 6A team unless you've done pay to play all along.
Really?
So, yeah. So even in soccer, anyway, both boys and girls. So even parents who just want their kids to be involved in high school sports, to keep them busy and to socialize and all, they're thinking, gosh, we better, they won't even make the team unless we get them involved in pay to play. So it's had a pretty baneful effect on who gets to participate in high school sports.
That's interesting. Because I know me, I look at, and I think, yeah, this year, one of my juniors didn't play travel ball. And this is my first year at this school that I'm at this year. So I didn't know any of the kids. I knew nothing about them. So, they told me about this kid. He came and he tried out. And I was looking at him. I said, wow, this kid's an athlete. He's an athlete. Took him on the team. He performed beautifully. Right. So, he did not play travel ball. And I would never, ever hold that against someone. To me, that's insane.
Mm-hmm. I don't think it's necessarily holding it against him, but the state of what playing and competition looks like at the rec level when so many people have left to go follow the masses into club sports, it's very hard, especially in a sport that requires, well, baseball and soccer, some very early fundamental skills. It's pretty hard to be at the level of the kids who are trying out for the high school team.
Yeah. But again, I'm just gonna say that I look, and I know that a lot of coaches are this way. I look for the athlete, and maybe that has a lot to do with the fact that I understand that I'm getting players. I don't care, what grade they're in, but I'm getting players that do not know how to play the game of baseball. Okay.
Yeah.
So whatever they're doing, wherever. I'm sorry, Gene?
You're going to have to train them anyway, right?
Exactly. So if I can get a kid that I see moves the right way and is athletic and, I said, well, you know what? Yeah, to your point, yes, I got to teach him anyway. So what's the difference? And I guess, to wrap this up, because we are coming up on an hour, if the travel baseball world or the travel soccer or whatever took the time to teach the fundamentals to these kids, then I don't think any of us would complain about anything.
Oh.
Yeah, that would help. It would also really help not to have to write checks that were so big.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, go ahead, Ken.
Oh, the overuse injuries. I mean, and I think that parents should know we're not talking about, minor injuries. We're talking about blowing out ACLs or
And
arm
UCLs.
injuries requiring Tommy John surgery at, ages 12 and 13 and all. So career-ending injuries for youth.
And totally unnecessary.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And
I mean,
preventable.
yes, they are preventable. I mean, I had on, I think it was Rich Taylor, who said, he's a pitching coach. He used to be the pitching coach for Pepperdine University. And he said that Dr. Andrews, and this is going back a while, this is like 10 years ago, that said he did like over 50 Tommy John surgeries on kids 12 years old. 50. I was like, oh my
And that's
God.
one doctor.
What's that?
That's one doctor out there, right? So many more happening.
Yeah.
Probably next to unheard of a generation ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the last episode that I did, I had on a physical therapist, and we were talking about arm injuries. And, you know, again, it goes back to the fact that if you just follow the guidelines, if you use your head.
Well, what we saw in youth club baseball here, unfortunately, was the coaches were doing their darndest to do the right thing by pitch counts. And the parents were pushing like crazy to say, keep our best pitcher in because we have a chance of still winning when there's one inning left and we're down 9-0. Make him pitch some more. What? What?
Yeah.
So the parents need some regulation too, right?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. I've had that. I mean, I've had, you know, pitch a kid Friday night and wherever we're competing to try and get to the championship game on Sunday, and a parent will walk up to me and say, you know, Jim, listen, don't worry about it. If you need to pitch little Johnny, he's good to go. And I look at the parents and say, get the hell away from me. Get away from me. He's not going on the mound. What are you, crazy? Get out of here. You know, I can be that way. It's just because you're insulting my intelligence.
You know. And ignoring sometimes what the athlete needs. The coach sometimes does know better.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Well, listen, guys, this was a great conversation. Do me a favor. Tell me where everybody can get your book, because I want anybody that listens to this show to go out and get it.
You can certainly go to your favorite bookstore and they will likely have to order it, but they can get it for you. Or in this day and age, of course, you can go online to Amazon or Barnes and Noble, and, you know,
any bookseller online,
probably
Jenny would have it.
Probably get it within 24 hours or something like that.
Okay, that's fantastic, because I enjoyed this conversation. I think that we need more people like you to bring awareness to the things that are going on in travel sports, so that, again, like I said before, so we can educate people.
We appreciate your interest and talking to you too, and we need more coaches like you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, guys, enjoy the rest of the night. And, any social medias or anything like that anybody can reach out to you on or follow you, or?
Email is fine.
Email. Okay, so if you want, give me your email address.
It's mine is easily findable. If you just search me as a professor at Portland State, and Gene.
So mine is my personal email, jeanlinscott@gmail.com.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So anybody out there, if you have any questions, there you go. Get the book. This is good stuff. And again, I can't thank you guys enough for coming on, and good luck with the book.
Thank you so much.
Take care now, guys.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
So there you go. That's a wrap for today's episode of Clearing the Bases. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the world of youth sports with Gene and Ken. They really shared some great information for everyone to think about. You know, baseball is all about practice, patience, and passion. Whether you're a player on the field, coach in the dugout, even a parent in the stands, keep it fun and let's grow the game. Let's work hard together to make the youth baseball experience a really great experience. So, if you enjoyed today's show, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Visit the website at thectbshow.net. Leave us a review and even sign up to be a guest. Your feedback helps us bring you the best content and reach more people in the baseball community just like you. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, reach out to us on social media, X, Facebook, Instagram, and now, finally, we're on YouTube too. You can also drop us an email at clearingthebases@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Once again, thanks for tuning in to Clearing the Bases. We can't wait to see you back here for our next episode. Until then, keep practicing, stay positive, and remember, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you on the next one.